Thanks for joining us today for DevSecOps Essentials, operating confidently with trusted packages. So we got quite a bit of material prepared. We'll be about an hour. I am going to try and jump to the next screen here. Let's go and do that. All right, so I'm Mike Holland. I'm a solutions engineer for JFrog based out of Sydney, Australia. And joined with me today is...
All right. Yeah. Hi, guys. My name is Harpreet. I'm based out of Bangalore, currently working as a technical success manager at JFrog. I've got almost a decade of experience in the industry and currently handling the ANZ region. Okay, so that's a bit about me. We can probably move to the next slide, please. All right. So about housekeeping, before we move to the main agenda and the content, some important information which I wanted to share. So yeah, during this session, you can use the Q&A button that you can see in your platform. You can click on that in case you have any questions. We'll be happy to respond to it during as well as at the end of the session. And in case you need any assistance, you have any issues, just raise a hand button, and then we'll be happy to address that as well. And of course, the golden question, is this being recorded? Yes, sir, it is. And you will get the recording through the email in the next couple of days through the email as well. And of course, for labs, in case you are an existing customer, you can use your cloud instances or your on-prem portal. You can connect there while we're running through the demo, and you can also check your local instances and walk through us along with us. And for prospects, or if you're new to JFrog altogether, you might receive the link. I'll also paste that shortly. You can use that link to sign up if you haven't done so far. You will get almost 14 days of access to the platform, which is hosted on the cloud. You can use it, play with it, get your hands dirty while we're working. It will be fun, right? And last, very important, which is feedback. So it it really means a lot if you can just take, I don't know, less than 120 seconds of your time after the session ends to provide some valuable feedback so that we can continue to improve and provide you some more valuable webinars in the future as well. Okay, so let's move forward. Thank you. Okay, so what is the agenda for today? We are going to first cover an overview about JFrog Software Supply Chain Platform, and then we'll move towards Artifactory and Xray quickly, and then we'll delve more into how do you secure your code using Xray, some of its features, capabilities, and of course, the demos and scenarios. We will cover the scenarios which our customers in the field have asked us, and we are going to showcase that live in action with the help of Mike through the real demos, right? And of course, Q&A will be there during the session as well as at the end, right, to some extent. So yeah, all right. So I think we can move on to the next slide, please. And yeah, maybe Mike, you want to take from here?
Perfect, thanks. So we're going to start with why JFrog, right? So JFrog started out creating a product that a lot of our customers are quite familiar with, called Artifactory, right? And to the point to where we're actually more known for Artifactory as opposed to the name of the company. But Artifactory started as a binary management tool to help our developers have that single source of truth to store their binaries across the software lifecycle. Things we can add to that around visibility and control, meaning that we can collect a lot of metadata around your builds when they're pushed into Artifactory and provide details that you may need for, say, promotion or gated processes. Providing vendor consolidation to great ways to integrate Artifactory into your CI build pipelines, other vendors' tooling. Simplified governance. So we got a great demo coming up where we're going to show how we can pull out that software bill and materials and how we can format it in formats that your governance or compliance teams may be able to better consume. Frictionless software development lifecycle is a big one, right? Being able to not only push those builds into Artifactory, but also being able to pull out your dependencies out of Artifactory, right? Which means they're more available, the performance is quicker in pulling them down, and we're also able to secure those as well. Developer productivity, right? So I mentioned before the the remote repositories and being able to pull those down. If the internet goes out, there's a lack of availability to those third-party public repositories. That can really reduce your developer productivity. So having those cached is a great use case for Artifactory. Recently, we've seen a big jump in ML ops, right? We've seen Hugging Face. We see a lot of companies integrating in AI, machine learning for maybe fraud protection in their mobile apps. A lot of use cases coming around, but being able to add that into Artifactory and store a lot of those modules, dependencies needed for machine learning and AI is a feature we're actively working to improve. Enterprise ready. So we'll talk a bit about having a high availability solution. Disaster recovery is built in. It's a very mature product, and we're able to support a lot of that high availability, keeping these critical pieces of your software development lifecycle available at all times. And then, of course, an open platform. So not only are we built on open source, but we continue to build in a lot of functionality, technologies, package types across our repositories and our tool chains to ensure that we can work well with a lot of other vendors who might be in your CI builds or your IDEs, for example. So with that, I'll just cover a bit of an overview of the products and we can offer with JFrog. So just to say, I mentioned a bit about Artifactory, right? Now, Artifactory is our core product. Artifactory is how we started, and that's really what we're well known for. Now, Artifactory is a repository for our binary management. Now, if you think about all the binary types or artifacts that you could be storing or using with your software development lifecycle, we typically see it start at the developer, right? And the developer writes a lot of first-party code, but that developer often uses a lot of third-party open source dependencies available on the web to augment their code. This allows companies to get those features, functionality, bug fixes quicker to their customers to consume their own software. And Artifactory really helps with that by not only caching third-party dependencies locally, but also providing repositories to store binaries that are created from your first-party code and those dependencies. Along with that, we're able to do is add a lot of rich metadata to those builds that are stored into Artifactory that we can use for decisions, for promotion, for release lifecycle management, and ultimately distribution, the software distribution to your customers or endpoints. So that's the goal of Artifactory. On top of that, if we move over to the right one box, we have where we can add security to those objects, right? So objects coming into Artifactory, artifacts at rest in Artifactory, we're able to scan those and provide you a lot of detail around the vulnerabilities, licensing, operational security. And Harpreet and I are going to do a few demos coming up to show how JFrog Xray Essentials, our software composition analysis tool, can help you in identifying those risks before you build it into your build pipeline, before you release code or promote code to the next level, before you distribute it to your customers. Moving down one box, just on JFrog Xray Essentials, we're going to do a lot of demos in there, but moving down one box is where we add a lot of additional features and functionality to our JFrog Xray with our JFrog Advanced Security. Now, one of the features there that I get a lot of great feedback from is something we call contextual analysis, right? Now, where a software composition analysis scanner might look at the technology, the name of a dependency, the version to identify all the CVEs attached to it, what contextual analysis can do in our JFrog Advanced Security is take those CVEs and compare them to your first-party code through the binary, by the way, right? We can use the binary and the bytecode in the binary to identify how those third-party dependencies are interacted with, to validate that the CVE assigned to that third-party dependencies is actually being executed by your first-party code. So it's a fantastic feature, amazing savings of time and resources with the developers, and keeps your developers focused on developing as opposed to researching CVEs. If I just touch over to the right, we've got JFrog distribution. So throughout the promotion process within Artifactory, from dev to test to QA, eventually you get to production. You have your builds go to production, and then you take those builds and you bundle them into a software bundle with other builds, other configuration files, other artifacts, and you need to distribute those out to your endpoints, to your customers, maybe globally, maybe at just separate countries. JFrog distribution is the tool for that. So we're able to take that software, and as you promote it and it's approved and it's meets certain criteria and gates, you can then push that out to your customer. So you think of a customer that has large software that you might download. Maybe you work on some networking devices and have to pull down firmware and software to update those devices. That would be how JFrog distribution can help get you that code quicker. Touch on JFrog Connect. So that's our IoT management, fleet management. Now, IoT, whether it's planes, cars, tanks, all have software, right? And that software all needs to be updated. And of course, that software being developed through Artifactory, being secured by X-Ray, eventually being distributed by JFrog distribution, may actually need to be pushed out to these IoT devices for update. And JFrog Connect is your way of doing that. The last thing I'll touch on here, far left, is JFrog Curation and JFrog Catalog. Now, JFrog Curation is like a firewall for those software dependencies. You can create policies that say, you know, if a particular license is in this dependency, if a certain number of CVEs or CVSS scores at a certain level is in this dependency, block it right at the front door of Artifactory. Don't even let it into my environment, right? Which is a fantastic tool in itself. But how Curation does this is the important part. And they do that through JFrog Catalog. Now, JFrog Catalog is where we go out and capture all the details around security, operational security, licensing of these third-party dependencies, and we store it locally within Artifactory. Now, why this is great is not only for the research abilities, you can find the dependencies you're using, what risks there are in those dependencies, as well as their dependencies, right? Transitive, indirect dependencies are often not thought about, right? You pick 4 or 5 dependencies for your software, but those dependencies have dependencies. And that's where Catalog captures all that information and stores it so that when you make a request for a dependency, Curation can look at it, look at that dependency, and reference it with Catalog and determine whether it needs to be blocked or allowed based on your policies. So a quick response there. Developers aren't waiting for scans to complete because we've already done the scans ahead of time. So that's kind of a high-level overview of our software supply chain platform. And now we'll just jump to the next slide. So with the deployment of that, right, we really stress the developer experience, right? You want to pick a certain technology, certain package type. We've got 32 plus technologies and package types to choose from, right? Whether you're creating Maven, PyPy, the demo today, we're going to do a bit of PyPy. I got some Docker containers. All these technologies supported, right? So very open platform, easy to integrate into what you have today or what you're looking to implement tomorrow. On top of that, we have self-hosted options that you can run on-premise and virtual machines, on-premise and Kubernetes environments. You can run your own instances within Google Cloud, Azure, or AWS. But also we offer a SaaS service. Maybe you don't want to handle the day-to-day upgrades, patches, HA, disaster recovery. Well, we can take that for you, right? And just allow your developers to work directly with Artifactory without having to deal with all the administrative overhead in the back end. So we've got lots of deployment options. We also support hybrid if you want to mix and match the two. All right. And then next, we're going to jump to a bit about X-Ray.
That's great. Sure. Thank you. All right. So about X-Ray, so the thing is, if you notice 80% of your code, whatever code that you have or software that you have is actually composed of the open source libraries, right? That you import, right? So that you don't have, your developers don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And you look at the code, it has so many import statements, right? So it is importing from the open source libraries. And the 20% is your actual code, which is written in-house. And what we need to make sure is we need to make sure what we are actually importing is clean and green, meaning it should be meeting the compliance of your organization in terms of vulnerabilities, whether in terms of licensing, right, and so forth. So let's move to the next slide, please. Yeah, all right. So this is actually a field report, and actually you can also search on the website, which is called State of Union Report, which was done by JFrog very recently, and it captures the year for 2023. And these are actually the popular packages that are out there which your developers use. And because they are popular, everybody uses them, and even hackers are aware of it, right? And if you notice the CVEs in each of these packages, on the right side, you will see the CVEs count, and then on the left side of your screen, on this slide rather, you would see that these are, it tells how much critical are there, how many are high, and then the lower count, which could be medium or low. So it covers all of that, right? So it gives a total combination of all of these. So the hackers know how to twist these these packages a bit, and then and you must have heard about the famous software supply chain attacks like the SolarWinds attack that had happened in the year 2020, right? So they do get twisted to some extent, and we may need to make sure that your organization, your code, your application is not affected by this, right? So let's move to the next slide. All right. So what is JFrog X-Ray and how does that help you out here, right? So JFrog X-Ray is actually a software composition analysis tool, which is meant to bridge the gap between your developers and the DevSecOps teams, right? And it's the only security scanning tool which natively integrates with Artifactory. And what it does a deep recursive scanning. What do I mean by deep recursive scanning? It whatever package that you have, it's going to unpack it, unlayer it, unpeel it at each and every layer, and it's going to check for vulnerabilities inside it and give you the report out of it, right? And just to give you like some more information on deep recursive scanning, we do have lot of scanners out there. We are not the only one. There are a lot of scanners, but then if you like take a Docker image, what would happen is most of these scanners would just unpeel it at layer 1 or layer 2 and going to just give you the information around the operating system type and 1 or 2 layer below about the binary. But actually it's going to unpeel at every layer, and it's going to give you deep information around the vulnerability that is being found. Okay. And some additional about information around the around X-Ray. It supports most of the packages type which Mike covered in the previous slides, which is around Maven, Gradle, Docker, you name it. Most of those are supported by X-Ray, and it can cover those for you for most of your projects. Okay. So now let's talk about some of the features that we see on the screen. So early detection, what it does, it means that of course during your software development life cycle, while you're working, you can detect vulnerabilities in your libraries, in your code, in your dependencies early on instead of moving later during the life cycle, right? And then it's going to prove costly both in terms of time as well as money, right? So it helps you save on that aspect. On-demand scans, we know you developers love to do coding through your terminal, right? You don't and that's what we provide you integration, which is called JFrog CLI. You just install that on your machine and you just run command, and in the back end it will be connected to the X-Ray, and then your code that you're typing in, you can just do a scan there at using your terminal. You don't have to go to any other portal. It's going to give you the results there and then. And of course, we are going to showcase that if the time allows. We are going to showcase this as a demo to you in the demo part. Okay. Now, the next thing that we have is about SBOM reports, which means software bill of material report, right? So this is basically meant to give you the detailed information about all of the components, libraries, dependencies that constitutes your complete software package, right? And they can be pulled in both the industry standard, which is called Cyclone DX or SPDX. It is supported. Plus, we are also working on some more formats, which will be coming soon in the future. But these are the currently 2 supported formats, which most of the industry is currently relying on, and it's being provided by X-Ray. Now you might have this question that, okay, you were talking about X-Ray, but where does it pull the information about these vulnerabilities, right? So it's a genuine question, and and I'll give you the answer. The answer is it pulls up the information from VulnDB, NVD database, Debian, Red Hat. These are the common, very, very known resources through which it pulls. And on top of that, we also have JFrog's own security research team that also evaluates that information, enriches that for X-Ray database, and then gives you more context so that you can make meaningful decisions out of the information that X-Ray is giving out for any specific vulnerability. So you can take decisions and make appropriate choices. And of course, just to give you some more information or around our JFrog security team, very recently, there was they noticed that on the Docker Hub, there are more than millions of repos created which are fake. They didn't had any images there, and they were just had malicious links which were meant for phishing scams, right? And then the JFrog security team noticed that and gave that information out to Docker security team, and Docker Hub security team removed all those millions of those phishing repos that were created there, right? So there is a good credibility with this team, and of course you will be in the right hands because they have good amount of experience, right? And then last point, which is around MLOps. So as Mike also covered with ChatGPT and the how the world is going towards MLOps and AIOps, right? So we are already supporting repositories like Hugging Face, which will help you to leverage those models which are available on those on which are hosted on Hugging Face. You can use them. And then, of course, we can also scan the signatures on those models just to make sure what you're importing seems genuine, but it's really at each and every layer. There is nothing fishy about it. Xray is going to give you that information and scan it and give you that information. So it's future ready as well, right? Let's move to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. So I also wanted to introduce you quickly around some additional capabilities, which is called Frogbot, in case you're not aware. So Frogbot is actually a Git-based bot which scans your Git-based repositories for vulnerabilities. And as you can see, it integrates with GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, the common ones that you have, and then it helps you maybe let's say if you're doing a pull request, as soon as even before they are merged, it is going to scan that and give you the output. So in the backend, this Frog bot is actually connected to Xray, and it's going to give you the information out, right? So most of the package like Maven, Gradle, NPM are supported with Frogbot. Okay. So of course, you can later on, once you revisit the slide, we can you can have more information. We can probably move next to the next slide that we have. Thank you. Okay. So which is yeah, IDE plugin. So the good part about JFrog is like we know what developers are working on. They are most of the time working using the IDE plugins. Yeah, they have popular IDEs, which could be IntelliJ, it could be Visual Studio Code, it could be Android Studio, right? Eclipse. These are very common and popular IDs that are being used, plus terminal. So our JFrog is providing integration with these IDE tools as well, not just your terminal, but with these IDE tools by going to the extensions, by adding some certain extensions, or even going to the marketplace, you can use that, right? And then it's going to scan your code, what you're going to write there, and it's going to give you the information out, what you need to do, what you need to modify. It's going to give you everything there, and then you don't have to go to any other place. It's right in front of you, so that you have ease of choice and ease of management. All right, so I think the next part is the demo, the much awaited demo, and probably Mike, you want to take over from
Yeah.
here?
Love to. Fantastic. All right, cool. Just before we jump into the demo and all the great details, I know everybody's waiting for the demo. I just want to answer one question we got into the chat, and we're asking about. I mentioned in the supply chain and all the pieces we can provide. The scans around security in Xray versus when curation comes into play, right? So that remember that's the third-party dependency software firewall. So we had a question around, just to clarify, when an artifact is first time pulled, it's the watches and policies which act on it and accordingly allow, deny as per the rules set, and only once the package is inside in cache, then only Xray is coming into picture. Now, we're going to cover demos and we're going to go into the details around that. I just want to identify where our curation starts and finishes versus where Xray starts and finishes. Now, in your cache, if you have not pulled a third-party dependency, the first time you request it is where curation provides that great value to block known vulnerable dependencies. Once it's been requested and curation approves it, if there's any 0 days that come out afterwards while the dependency is cached within Artifactory, that's where Xray now scans and finds those CVEs, those licensings, those risks after the fact. So that's where the two products kind of split, and that's a great question. I get it all the time. So I just wanted to cover that. As far as the rest of your question, we're gonna do a few demos. It's gonna go into a bit more detail around how X-Ray can scan it and find those. So let me just jump into our demo environment and talk a bit about what we've prepared for you, right? So we got together, we created a SaaS instance of our Artifactory environment. And you may have noticed Harpreet was nice enough to throw a link into the Q&A, the webinar chat. And that first link is where you can go and sign up for your own SaaS instance. So what I've created today is a trial instance of Artifactory to create my demo environment. I just wanted to show you how easy it is to get set up. So once you click on that link and sign up, it's been available for 20 minutes. So if you haven't signed up already, what are you doing? You go into it, first time you log in, you'll see this quick start guide that you see in front of you. So what I got in front of you is the web GUI. And this quick start guide really helps you create a few repositories, integrated into your tools. Maybe you have your IDE, a few maybe Maven pull tools, to get your dependencies onto your local laptop. And then a few things to help you enable security, things we're going to do today around indexing repositories and just to help you get started. So it's a great tool to help you learn. So what we have with this platform here is the first tab we have is the application tab, right? And you can see we got a lot of results around where our artifacts are stored, what artifacts we have, dashboards around size, how much storage we have, the traffic we're seeing. We can see all the X-ray tools around the scans list, and I'm going to cover a bit more of that. We see the package catalog and curation. Just a package catalog for all that details that you can pull out and see. I mentioned distribution pipeline. So this is where you would go and look at the results of all of the JFrog products in your software supply chain tooling. If I jump over to the administrative tab, this is where we configure all those products, right? Where we go in and provide all that detail. And what that does is really great, provides a way to segregate RBAC controls, right? Which is a very big question we get from our customers. How do we stop certain groups from, looking at different repositories, making configuration changes in it? The web GUI here is really just a front end for our REST API. And that REST API is how our RBAC is integrated. So just want to highlight that. As far as the environment that I've built, we can jump back here and we can just have a look. Created a few repositories using a Python application as well as a Maven application for this demo. And I've done it all integrated into GitHub, which is a partner of ours, right? We've got a great partnership with them, using GitHub Actions, using GitHub to store that first-party code. Actions actually pulls their artifacts from Artifactory, and we'll show a lot of that in the demo. So with that, let's go ahead and start with our first question.
All right, sure. So the first question that we get at times from the customer is, I'm using Artifactory, but I'm not really sure if I have entitlement for X-Ray. Can you help me with that to understand?
Yeah, no, and like Harpreet, you nailed it, right? Like it seems like every other customer we talk to, we say, hey, you're loving the platform, you're using our Artifactory. Are you aware that you have X-Ray available, right? And it's quite common. A lot of our Artifactory customers are developer focused, right? They're nose deep into their IDEs, building that first party code, providing a lot of functions and fixes for their business. And often security is kind of a second thought, and companies kind of break out into separate groups around application security. And we often spend a lot of time explaining about X-Ray and the value we can add on top of Artifactory, right? So just to highlight, X-Ray is included in, if you have a self-hosted instance, in the Pro X, Enterprise X, Enterprise Plus license levels. So it's included in there as a part of the license. So you may have it today and not even be aware of it. If you have one of our SaaS offerings, Enterprise Plus or Enterprise X also comes with X-Ray, right? So you have it in your environment already set up for you, and it's easy to integrate. If you need any help with that, I mentioned before, I'm a technical contact based in Sydney, cover all of ANZ. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to show you and answer any questions that you have. But just to jump in and how we would show, within the SaaS platform, we can see if we jump down here, we've got a link to My JFrog portal, right? Now, My JFrog portal allows you to manage your SaaS instances, right? Some customers have 20, 30, 100 of them around the globe. Some customers have one or two, but that My JFrog platform or portal allows you to manage all those across your environments, whether that's dev, test, production, and pull out all that great detail. So we've got a lot of usage statistics, billing information. But in this particular window here, if you just look down here, you can see that what I've created for this trial environment is an Enterprise X trial. And as you recall, for SaaS environments, Enterprise X and Enterprise Plus comes with X-Ray, right? Which is lucky, because this would be a very short demo if I had picked another one. So we're very lucky today that created the demo with the right license. So lots of great detail in there. If you're in a self-hosted environment, you only need to look at the license. There'll be an option there in that administrative tab. You can have a look there, see what level your license is.
Great. Okay. So let's move on to the second one. So I think here we'll go into some technicalities and we'll, cover from the basics. If you're already using X-Ray, of course, we'll have some interesting things after this basic part is covered. So the first part is, Mike, how would I enable X-Ray on a repository, right? How do I set it up? How do I configure it? Let's start from the beginning for using X-Ray.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, so maybe you just realized that you've had X-Ray all these years with your Artifactory, and you've enabled it. What's the next step, right? Well, we jump over into this administrative tab. We jump down to X-Ray, and we can look at our indexed resources. So we can jump in here, and you can see that I've created a couple of repositories, and I've already indexed or added them to the index. But if you wanted to add yours, you would go to add a repository. You'd see a few here on the left-hand side, and you would just move them over to this environment. So if you picked one up, you check it, move them over. Maybe you want all of them to move over, and then you would save that, right? And now you'd have your environment in there, and they would be index repos. Now, what would then happen is that process of indexation, right? Now, you can speed it up a bit and say index now, but what X-Ray is doing is it's pulling each one of these binaries, each one of these artifacts out, pulling it apart and building what we call dependency graph, where they link CVEs based on the technology, titles, version of dependencies, maybe the dependencies used in build, and we're linking them all together, right? So CVEs to build, CVEs to dependencies, and we create that dependency graph that allows us to, when new CVEs come out, we can instantly identify in the dependency graph where they fit in, and define that blast radius that we'll show in some of the reporting and the software building materials that we'll show in another demo. So now that we've got that indexed, maybe I'll just cover real quick the repository types I have listed here, right? So I touched on the remote repositories and how we can cache third-party dependencies. So the indexing that's done here are all the dependencies that my software application, in this case, Python and PyPy, have requested. The local, so the GitHub PyPy local is a local repository. And when I run my builds, this is where I would store my binaries and all the detail around that. We're going to show a bit in there coming up. The final one I have here is actually a local Docker repository. So once I create my Python app, I put it into a Docker container, use Alpine in this case, and then store it in that Docker local repository.
Great. And as you're on the screen, just for the awareness, I think just next to repository tab, which is highlighted, just next to it is the builds tab, right? Where you actually store your builds. And probably, Mike, you want to speak something about it a bit?
Excellent. Yeah. So as Harpreet rightly showed and I missed, it's not just repositories that we can index, right? If you wanted to index those builds that you're pushing into local repositories, you also have that ability. We're actually going to show a demo coming up where we integrate that into GitHub Actions and we automate how it's pushed in.
Cool. Great. All right. So now the next part that we have here is, yeah, now I have started indexing my repositories. How will I get alerted, in my packages about any CVEs, and maybe if there are any licensing issues, how do I do that?
Fantastic. All right, cool. So yeah, while it's creating those dependency graphs I mentioned before, oftentimes as these environments start to grow, you may have a self-hosted instance that's limited on resources, right? And one of the great options, and I forgot to mention, Harpreet, is where you can define a retention period in these repositories. Now, if I just jump into the configuration, we can show here a default retention period is 90 days. Now, what this allows is as that dependency graph grows and grows and grows, consumes more memory and CPU, maybe you've got some artifacts that, didn't make it past the dev promotion process, right? Maybe they didn't make it into production, right? You needed that security information to get it to the next promotion, but you've decided that you don't need to promote it, it's going to stay back. There's no need to keep that security information. So retention period is a great way to clean up your database and have a much more performant environment. So it's a question we often, Harpreet and I, get from our customers all the time around, how can I make future scans quicker? Retention period is a great way to clean up your environment, keep it nice and performant. But on top of that, of course, now that they've indexed and all the repos have been indexed and security scans have been completed, we would jump back over here to that application tab, and we'd have a look at our scan list, right? And we can see here that we've got the same repositories, and as Harpreet mentioned out, the builds as well. We can see the scan results of those, right? So we can see, maybe in a Docker container, we can see all the vulnerabilities from the last one we pushed, and we get a great dashboard around, policy violations, that software build and materials, security issues. So that's where we would go and we would grab those. But if you wanted to be alerted to this detail, right? Maybe you don't have this in front of your face all day long. You could jump into the administration tab down in X-Ray, and you can configure watches and policies. So a feature we call watches and policies, where you would define a policy for the things that you're looking for within your environment, and then assign that to a watch, which would tie it to a repository, which would then alert you when these things are found. So for example, we've created a policy here around security, right? So this GitHub example policy looks for security issues. And more specifically, it goes and it looks for CVEs, right? With a minimum severity of critical, right? Now, critical is as high as you go. So it would find those. And once it finds those, it has a way of alerting you. So that would be the then side of the environment. Of the policy here, and you can see we can do things like trigger a webhook, right? Maybe you've got another service that you need to alert, and provides more alerts to your security environment. Jira tickets, notify via email. One of the things I want to highlight here is in the block section, we can actually block that CI build. Now that saves you a lot of time because, oftentimes if you have a build environment, maybe it's a SaaS as well, those build minutes can cost you. Knowing right at the beginning that you have a CV and a vulnerability that you don't want in your binary, you need to complete that build, you can block it right there at the beginning. So that's a great use case. And just to jump onto that and show you a quick watch, right? We can define the watch here and take that same policy and apply it to repositories, as well as builds, as well as software bundles. So in this particular case, we've assigned that policy to, or these policies here to this particular watch. So on those repositories that we had. I think that covers the watches and policies.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think the one thing which I think Mike, we missed to add is about the licensing. Maybe if you want to show something around how do we cover licensing through policies, licensing adherence.
Yeah, no, fantastic point. You're right. No, licensing is another one. And in fact, we configured a licensing example here, and Harpreet actually came across a fantastic use case around licensing. Maybe Harpreet, you want to just chat about that for a second?
Right, sure. So I had one of my customers reach out to me, and what they wanted is, as part of their compliance and regulations, what they wanted is to make sure their Docker images don't have anything which is part of the Oracle JDK, right? It should be an open JDK, but it should not be Oracle JDK. And we wanted to make sure, and we wanted to ban that. So of course, if we search with and because Oracle open source licenses are OTN or BCL licenses, and there's a ton of options there that Mike is showing you on the screen. So we enable that and we configure that. But yeah, and then we can trigger a violation which is on the right side, which is enabled. And then if any image is to be found, and that if that repo is indexed, you will get the notification about those violations, so that you can take appropriate actions and probably get another image which doesn't have those kind of licenses. So it's a pretty solid use case which we had around the license tape. This is just one, but yeah, this is at present it's approximately close to 2000 open source license type which X-Ray is looking at, and it can allow you to filter that to make sure you are meeting your compliance and regulations around that. So just a quick word around this.
Awesome.
Okay.
And just a side note, was that financial that they didn't want those licenses, or did they have a reason around there, or?
So the reason is they wanted to make sure that it's because Oracle license is majorly converted now, because in Java we have two kind of licenses. One is open source free version, and then Oracle one is a paid one, right? So we wanted to make sure that the software we are shipping is not having the the business license, which is the Oracle license, right? It should be the free version of Java, so that we are not bound by those regulations. That's the reason.
Excellent, excellent. I really like that use case. I might steal that. So
Yeah.
just to let you know, you might be, yeah. There's no copyright on that, right? All right, cool. So let's move to the next one then.
Yeah, absolutely. So another question that we got, and very interesting question, again related to compliance and regulations, is we are, as a company, we are being audited, and our AppSec team is requesting an SBOM report, and specifically they are requesting the report in Cyclone DX format. Can X-Ray help us do that?
They can, yeah. No, that's a great use case. We come across this a lot, right? Where compliance and governance groups need this detail to provide to their customers to show that these apps going on your mobile phones, maybe running in these browsers, are compliant and secure. So yeah, so let's just jump over back to the applications tab. We'll go into X-Ray and bring up one of our builds in the scan list, and we can see some of that detail in the software build material. So I'll go ahead and pick this one. So again, this is our Python application. And in the latest run, we can go in there and see, a quick dashboard. I showed this a little earlier, a quick dashboard of all the policy violations that might have been found to those watches and policies, vulnerabilities from that software composition analysis scan, licensing details, as we touched on before. But if we just go down to this tab here, we can see we've got the software building materials. And this particular Docker container running a Python application has not only the operating system packages, but it also contains the software used to build the Python application that I meant that's running on that Docker container. So now you can see the list here, all of its dependencies, the build, all the Alpine packages that need to be added to support running that build. And then we can go over here to this little 3 dots, and we can say, well, let's export the scan data, right? So I think this is what you're talking about here. You can see the scan results. We got a few options. Now, Cyclone DX is a common software building materials format supported by OWASP, and gives you that list of details. Now, we can go through and say, you know what? I want software building materials. Maybe I want some of the vulnerability details as well, right? So I can show my customers, here's the build of materials, and also here are the known vulnerabilities in our environment, just a bit of a heads up. And we can say, okay, do we want XML format? Do we want JSON format? And what this really allows is, if you're using a tool that can consume the software build of materials list standard, you're able to pull it in there and generate those reports. So if you're on the compliance governance team, really saves you a lot of time being able to consume these reports provided by Artifactory and X-Ray, and allow you to create those reports around this detail. So yeah, so if we go ahead and export that, it'll download it, and we get a nice little zip file, and then we can actually bring it up here. So again, this is that XML format created. And you can see all the details around every software package that you saw listed in that GUI earlier, right? So now you've got the format, comes out in a zip file, expand the zip, maybe provide it to your compliance team, and you're off to the races.
Thank you for covering this. Okay, I'll cover the next scenario here. Pretty interesting question. Now, as we covered earlier as well, that JFrog supports CLI integration, ID integration, right? And also for your awareness, folks, we also cover CI/CD integration, right? Which is where with your popular CI/CD runners like Jenkins, right? GitHub Actions, we support that. And with GitHub and JFrog announcement, I think probably we'll cover this part. Probably we'll cover the scenario that if our development teams are using GitHub Actions to create their builds, how can we integrate that with X-Ray? How can we, GitHub Actions and integrate X-Ray for our pipelines to make sure our build jobs, whatever we are running, is safe and secure and it is actually clean.
Ah, great, excellent question. All right, so if I just jump into my GitHub environment, what we have created here is a workflow, right? We use GitHub Actions to compile our Python code along with those third-party dependencies that are pulled from Artifactory. And then once that GitHub action, that runner creates the build, that information, along with all the metadata around it, and I can show you an example here in a second, is pushed back into Artifactory. So just to show an example how the JFrog CLI can make integration into your CI build pipelines, again, whether they're the Azure DevOps, whether they're the GitHub, the Jenkins, TeamCity, name your flavor. We can show here an example of, we have, in this case here, we have an action that creates the authentication information and sets up your JFrog CLI, right? Downloads the latest version, attaches you using variables within GitHub Actions. We're able to identify the URL endpoint, right? The project name. So in this case, I'm using a project, which is a way of separating out the objects within Artifactory. You can define that here. And just as a side note, we're using OpenID Connect to authenticate our developer GitHub environment with Artifactory, right? So no need for service accounts, credentials, usernames to be stored in our GitHub Actions. We can do it all through OAuth and OpenID Connect. So as we go through here, you'll see a lot of standard primitives around caching, pulling the code out of our environment, building the Python package. But what we want to get down to creating the Docker container, we want to get down to the last little bit, right? Because I just want to cover this last little section here. Once that build is completed and how we push it back into Artifactory, we've got a lot of these commands here where we take the build and all of the environment variables, store that into Artifactory with the build, right? We can take all the dependency information, store it in Artifactory with the build. We can take all the details in that Git file, right? So you're using a Git repository, you've done all your changes, your merges, your pull requests, all that details in your Git file, and we can store that into Artifactory, right? Keep a history of the build, right? And then finally, we can do the build publish where we actually push the build into Artifactory. But once that's all completed, this last one here is what we call the build scan. So that builds an Artifactory now, and you want to tell Artifactory, we need to kick off a scan. And typically that's our last step, because once we've created the builds, that's when we decide whether the build needs to be promoted to the next environment. Maybe it's a quality assurance, maybe it's a testing environment. You have some automated testing that needs to run. But maybe one of those gates to promotion is the passing of a security scan. So we can see that runs here. And when this is all run, so I just have an example here where I kicked off this run, ran successfully. We can see that we're able to provide a JFrog job summary, right? So my build has been created. These are the artifacts that have been pushed into my local repository. And we can see here that there's a link to the build scan results, right? So now if I just open this in a new tab, we can see a quick summary of those results down here, but we can also jump into here, and we can see that the results of that scan, right? So we can go into our build publish scan. We can see X-ray data has been published automatically for this particular one. Let's see if it comes up. See if it angered the demo gods. But we'll see all that detail again. So that dashboard we saw earlier, right? with a high level summary of the policy violations we ran into, right? The security risks that we found, the licensing details, right? The software components. So all that detail we saw earlier is now provided, and it all ran automatically through our GitHub Actions using JFrog CLI.
All right. Thank you for covering this. All right. So I think with the interest of time, we are actually getting some interesting questions out there in the chat. Probably I'll pick one of those because of the time constraint that we have now.
Maybe
Uh,
we'll let everybody give a chance to finalize their questions. And just real quick, maybe I could just do a quick wrap up while we're putting those questions in. So this is your chance, everybody, to put your questions in. We are seeing quite a few, so please put those in. But just as you're doing that, sorry, I'll just to wrap up a bit. I just wanted to just highlight what we've covered today, right? So how JFrog can provide a lot of really great value in that software supply chain, right? If it's from the start of pulling those dependencies in, blocking known bad dependencies, from pulling in your software, being able to see your source code with that IDE extension that Harpreet mentioned, scan those packages. You can see the whole software supply chain can really be improved and provide a lot of visibility, observability with the JFrog platform. Now, what we covered today are all the boxes you see here in green, right? So we covered the X-Ray essentials. What I wanted to highlight is, the boxes, the boxes here with the OS package curation and package catalog, right? So that's a separate product we didn't talk a lot about today around curation, right? The yellow boxes are that JFrog Advanced Security. I mentioned that contextual analysis and how we can provide a lot of value to help you reduce those false positives and get your developers developing as opposed to researching every single CVE that comes through their dependency. So yeah, so we just want to highlight how we're coming through that, and then finally we'll just jump to the last slide and we'll answer a few questions.
Right. I think I'll take one interesting one, which was around JFCLI, right? I think the question is, can you give some insight around JFCLI, quick insight? Maybe we got, I think, close to 7 minutes. So I think we can give a quick information around how we can use JFCLI, some of the popular parameters around it, and how they can use it on the fly without having to go to any GUI, just using the command line. I think that will be interesting and quick.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Yeah, so you're right, Harpreet. I covered JFrog CLI and its use cases in the CI build pipelines, whatever one you happen to be using. But it's also a great tool if you want to run locally on your desktop, right? If you want to run a scan, we call it an on-demand scan. And we can run it locally on our machine, as well as, I mentioned that there was curation, right? If you had a block that you saw while you were pulling dependencies, you could use the JFrog CLI to see what curation policy blocked it. So you're right, not just a CI tool, but a great way to make it easier to consume that REST API in Artifactory locally on your desktop, and a great command line interface. So you're right. So you can run those scans, pull those results out, and those on-demand scans are also able to pull out reports on those details as well. So yeah, lots of great functionality there. And I guess, what a lot of people, concerned about, JFrog CLI is actually a free product, right? We offer that to our Artifact customers to help them better consume Artifactory and X-Ray in their environments.
Yeah.
I see a couple more questions coming in.
Yeah. All right. And then there was one question around the GitLab integration of X-Ray. It is absolutely supported. We do integrate that, and you can also leverage Frogport that we covered earlier. You can also use that, and using the JFCLI, which I think Mike was covering, right? So that is possible.
Excellent.
And
Again, that use case with GitLab would also be JFrog CLI. You saw the code I did for the workflow for GitHub Actions. it looks almost identical for GitLab as well.
Right, right. Yeah. And I think there is one interesting question which says, what happens if a developer just renames the file before uploading to it? Is it going to have an impact? Is it going to goof up X-ray in some extent? What will be the result?
Yeah, and that's funny you mentioned that question, Harpreet. We were just chatting with a customer the other day, and they were saying, listen, we block the internet. We don't allow them to go to public repos. We really want them to use Artifactory to pull those artifacts out so we can, provide the availability, performance gains, as well as security. But we found out the other day that our developers are emailing each other dependencies. And so you're right. Sometimes the developers try to change the name. But at the end of the day, these public repositories, they all hash their dependencies, right? So, if you're pulling from a known public repository, a file name, it's going to have a hash, it's going to have a version, it's going to have a lot of details you'd expect to see. And we use that to correlate around known CVEs for that particular package. So if we're pulling something into a remote repository that has been modified, maybe, Bitcoin miner has been added, we're able to run those scans to determine that is indeed a false dependency, right? We're also, when you set up those remote repositories, you point it at a public repository to pull down that image, right? So if you were to bring in your own, maybe add it to your IDE so you can compile locally, that same developer who found a workaround for their IDE would be busted as soon as they started their build pipeline, right? Because you control the configurations in your build pipeline, and you would have those point to Artifactory to pull your dependencies, as well as push those into Artifactory with all the details around it. But yeah, just to kind of cover on that, if we did look at that build environment I showed before, you can see that all those details around, I think I didn't mention, but all those environment details are added in there. So you could actually identify, right, the developer who pushed their code in and tried to use, different named dependencies. You can get that detail out of there by capturing that within your build pipeline.
Cool.
All right. I think we're kind of almost out of time here. We got about 2 minutes left. Sorry, Harpreet, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing. I think we are almost at the top of the hour, and we still have few questions, but don't worry, folks. We will surely cover those questions in the through the email, right? And the email-based communication. Don't worry on that, and happy to take it later on offline as well. No worries. But I think, yeah, Mike, if you want to add anything at the end, you want to say anything to the audience, it will be good.
Yeah. If you're based in Australia, New Zealand, and you have some technical questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy to have a conversation with you and chat about what we can do with JFrog. Cool.
All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thanks everyone for joining in today. See you later.